This video is a short follow-up to my previous video, Altruism, Game Theory, and Funding a Public Sector. In that previous video, I outlined how it can be harmful to have a lot of sacrifice in a society. You can make a society collapse. I offered Red China and Soviet Russia as examples in the extreme. And you can see even today, you can just look at countries like Greece or Italy and kind of watch what's happening to them. They have burgeoning tax rates and burgeoning government. And you can kind of just see right before your very eyes what happens when too much sacrifice is made. And one of the solutions for maybe this country would be to do it different than Western Europe, to maybe adopt some of the research that I showed in the previous video, and this video then is basically how we get there from here. So step number one would be to adopt the best tax plan ever. Below I've outlined what I think if adopted would be the best tax plan ever. Step number two, then after you have the best tax plan and investors know that you have the best tax plan, the best place in the world to make investments, you assume the best GDP growth ever. That's a lot. Those are linked. It's logical to assume with the best tax plan ever devised that you'll have the most investment ever made. As long as some other things such as property rights and law and order and other things need to be in place, but probably the largest. You can ask investors, what is the largest single factor you look at when investing, and see, you can determine for yourself if the tax plan is the most important and most weighty of the factors. I'm assuming it is, and what we see below is a year-by-year follow-through of what would happen in this country if we had a fair tax, a consumption tax. Rich people who buy more things would pay more tax. Poor people who buy less or buy things that are less pricey would pay less tax. But in the long run, a 16% fair tax, consumption tax on the whole nation, everyone's economic activity would be taxed at 16% in the first year, and then that goes down approaching 5% as I outlined in the original video, the first video. So in 2013, our GDP, if you broadcast to the world that this country was going to have 16% and only 16% tax, assuming that our GDP would jump up from 12 to 16 in that very first year as investors flooded this country with money. And then the tax revenue on that at 16% would be 2.56 trillion. And then year-over-year growth should approximate about 12% annual growth. Again, unless another country were to adopt the tax plan that I'm saying here, we wouldn't have the competition. Therefore, we would be the ones making all the growth in the world, or most of the growth in the world. So GDP would go up, 6 to 12%. I'm assuming maybe even 8. GDP can rise at 18%. It's done that before in this country. It's been doing that in Qatar for a couple of years here. So 12% would be right in the middle. Let's say 6 to 18% GDP growth, and 12% would be the average. Looking at that, in 2014, this country would create $17.9 trillion in wealth, 15% fair tax rate. Again, what you're doing is you're broadcasting to the world that you're going to reduce the fair tax rate 1% every year. So they know to get in early. The investors know it's only going to get better through time, so they're going to want to get in early. And so you'll get people in before you get down to 5%. You're going to get more and more investors making more and more investments. Because they can see the future. They can look into the future and see the tax rate will be falling. That means profits will be increasing. Even tax revenue will be increasing steadily. There is one glitch in the system. It occurs right after 2020. There is a drop in tax revenue that occurs temporarily, but this is overcome by growth, and eventually in 2037 we would have a GDP of $241 trillion, fair tax of 5%, and that would lead to $12 trillion in tax revenue. Thank you.